this was a new unit I have not done before. It's through Expeditionary Learning on that Engage New York site. So it's just the process of getting kids to learn about poetry. So we started with 2 guiding questions. What makes a poem? And the kids really didn't have a clear idea about what makes a poem. And we also talked about what inspires people to write poetry. So through this process, we read the book Love That Dog, and we're reading about a boy named Jack who really is not interested in learning about poetry at all. He thinks poetry's for girls. And so we hear Jack's reaction to the poems his teacher gives him to read and how he doesn't always understand them, but he likes how they sound, and his teacher teaches them about, different aspects of poetry. And that's kind of what we did too. We read the book, we talked about Jack and his reactions. We read a lot of the poems that Jack's teacher used with him. And we analyzed, okay, so what does make a poem? Imagery came up over and over again. We talked a little bit about similes and metaphors, and we learned a little bit about those. They were surprised to find out that a poem doesn't have to rhyme. Valerie Worth was one of the poets we read about who doesn't use rhyming. She uses free verse. So we looked at all those things, and they had to find examples of those things. So eventually, after learning about that, they wrote their own poem. What did they want to write about? They had to come up with a list of things that they felt strongly about. They learned through Jack in the book that that's what poets do. They write about something they feel strongly about. And they could choose, do you want to try to rhyme it? Do you want free verse? And then eventually they also picked out what poet they really connected with, which poet really inspired them. They chose a poem that poet wrote that they really enjoyed, and many of them kind of based their poem that they wrote on what that poet wrote. We read about the poet's life. We looked at a timeline of their life and a short biography, and we took some notes as well. And putting all of that together, their final product was not only a poem they wrote, but also an essay explaining, well, what did this poet do in their poetry that I really connected with, that inspired me to write my own poem. And that was something they were supposed to explain in their essay as well. These were the major events in this poet's life, and this is how this poet inspired me to write my own poem. And that was the final culminating performance, was sharing all those poems and our essays and what we learned about the poets. Yes, we talked a lot about it the next day after we had shared, just to get some feedback, how they felt about that poetry performance. And you could tell they were really excited about it, but they all expressed how nervous they were at having to do that, which kind of didn't surprise me, but kind of did, because they all did such a nice job when they were sharing of concealing their nerves and dealing with their nerves. And yeah, we talked a lot about, did you look up from your notes? We talked about how to highlight something in your essay so that they would remember to look up. We talked about who spoke loud enough. Could you understand everybody? And they felt like everybody did a good job of speaking up and speaking clearly. So they were very excited about sharing their poems. And I think they were glad they did it, but they were very, very nervous about it too.